We pray, gracious and loving God, we give you thanks for your holy word as has been shared with us. The words of the ancient Hebrew Bible, the words of your psalmist, and yes, the words of your Son, Jesus. And these words give us some strength. Help us discern what is wanted and what is needed. And grow us together as a community of faith based on your word and the example that Jesus has given to us. It's in your holy name we pray. Amen. Amen. Wants versus needs. The door to the big room of wants is a lot larger, and the space is a lot greater than the door to the room of needs. So just keep this image in mind. It's always an important lesson, as I shared with the children this morning, to be able to teach them the difference between wants and needs. And as you can see, many of our children already know the difference between what they want and what they need. But it's also an important challenge to remind ourselves, adults, as our ability to consume grows with age, we also have to pay attention to the difference between wants and needs. Let's talk about wants first. Who can help me make a list of wants? What are some of your wants? Just shout it out. You don't even have to raise your hand. What are some of your wants? Don't be embarrassed. What do you want? Money! We want money. Yes, there's another want out there. Another want. Want. What?
Good health.
Good health. We
That's
want
a need.
good health. What else do we want? Come on, be honest with me. I'm not going to condemn you.
A vacation.
You want a vacation, right? Yeah, you want a new car. We want all kinds of things. We want no mortgage. Yeah, no mortgage. No bills, right? What else do you want?
Clothes.
Clothes. We want beautiful clothes, high-heeled shoes, fancy suits. We want all kinds of stuff. What about needs? What do we need? What do you need?
Food.
Food.
Water.
Health. What else? God. We need God. Food, health. What else? Love.
Clothing.
What else? Clothing. We need some clothing. Prayer. We need prayer. What else?
We need each other.
We need each other. We need friends. We need family. There's a lot of lists that we can put together, and if we were able to document them up here, if I could write them all up and we had time, I imagine that our list of wants would be longer than our list of needs. And I would also imagine, as I heard here already, that we both want good health and we need good health, that there's some wants and some needs that intersect. We need and we want good health. We need resources, money to take care of ourselves. There's certain things that we must have for life. Regardless of our list of wants, we can also see not only are they longer than the needs, but wants and needs can change over a lifespan. What a child sitting up here with me would want and what I would want or what you would want in mature life is very different. As life goes on and we figure out, well, this is really important, I don't really need this, and as we look at our closets and our garage and our basements and attics, we find that there's all kinds of wants stored up there that we've never needed. Amen? So what do we do with that? We bring it to the church. And we have tag sales, we have rummage sales, we have all our wants, we lay them out on tables, and we ask people to take our wants because we don't need them. And they get home with our wants and find out that they don't need them, and then they have to have a sale too. So this whole business of wants and needs is very serious, and in countries like ours, it's very serious because truly the economy does work on wants and needs, influencing us so much that we want certain things that we never even heard of, but we want them. And then we kind of figure out that we don't need them later on. You see, the prophet Elijah, he was in the business also of helping people sort out what your wants are and what your needs are. And he was sent by God to confront a particular king, King Ahab. He was one of a series of kings during the time and very early in Israel's great kingdom time, who had fallen out of love with God and had fallen in love with another God, the God of Baal, B-A-A-L. And interestingly enough, this God was also a God of creation, a God of rain, a God of bounty, a God of harvest, and a God of fertility. And so a lot of people were starting to turn to the Canaanite God. This is the people of Israel, finding that, well, we can go to this other God we can probably get our wants a lot easier than having to sacrifice and go to the God of Israel. And so 1 Kings chapter 16, verse 3 tells us, King Ahab did more to provoke the anger of the Lord than all the kings of Israel who were before him. So this is a very difficult king in the eyes of God. And so King Ahab turned away from God, the God of Israel, to worship this Canaanite god. He even found himself marrying a Canaanite, a woman who introduced him to this god, Jezebel. That's his wife's name. And so Baal, the great god that the Canaanites knew, who would provide rain and thunder and bounty and fertility, became the god of this king of northern Israel. King Ahab was the ruler of all of this northern kingdom, and he did have this foreign wife. And Jezebel, as I said, introduced him to Baal. What resulted in all of this was King Ahab turning from the God of Israel and starting to construct worship places for this other god, Baal. He was confused. He was confused between his wants and his needs. He wanted things for his kingdom, he wanted things for himself, but he couldn't see what his true need was, which was to stay in a faithful relationship with the one God of Israel. Well, God, being angry in this time and in this story, turned against the people of Israel. A famine came, a drought came. And there in the midst of all this struggle was the prophet Elijah. The prophet Elijah, under the care of the Lord, had already been on assignments. He had been sent into the wadi, and he was taken care of. Even during this time of famine, he was taken care of by God. The ravens provided food and meat for him. And then God would call the prophet again and say, you need to move on, and I want you to go and meet up with this one widow. She's going to be outside the city gates. And so Elijah faithfully responded to God's instructions to move from one place to another. Even though Elijah was living in the midst of this severe drought and time of famine, he was always faithful to going to God for whatever he needed. He was always faithful. And what God asked him to do, no matter what he wanted, he stood with God. The needs and wants of the prophet Elijah were very limited. He didn't need a lot. He was living through a time of no rain and no harvest, but he would always be led by God to a place where he could be fed. And so here he is. He meets up with this widow. This widow who had basically given up on life. She had so much what she wanted before in life. She had a house, and the scripture tells us this house was unique. It was 2 stories, which meant that she had a lot of wants at one time in her life. And then when her husband died, things started to fall apart. And then when this drought came and the famine came, things really got bad. She had one son. I'm sure she wanted more. Maybe she had more at one time. But she was ready to give up, and she's outside the city gates, and she's just looking around for a few sticks. All she wanted was to make a little fire. All she wanted was to prepare that last meal, to take that little half of cup of flour meal that she had in her little jar, to make one last cake with a little bit of oil that she had. And there comes Elijah. And Elijah sees that she has so little want, but so much need. Her want was just that little last cake so that she could die with her son with maybe a tiny bit of that hunger satisfied. Elijah says to her, make me some cake. Make me a piece of bread. Make me something that we can share. And Elijah goes on to tell her not only to prepare for herself and her son, but Elijah told her to do it out of that scarcity. All that little want that she had to break through that barrier to see the need of Elijah. And she was willing to do that. You know, she wasn't a believer in the God of Israel. I don't know what she believed in at that time, whether she was a follower or a believer in Baal, but she took that jar of meal and it was almost empty. She took that oil that was almost gone and she made that little cake. And then she heard Elijah say this strange thing, you know, if you do this, the God of Israel will not allow that jar of meal to go empty and will not let that flask of oil to go empty. There will always be enough. until God sends rain upon the land and the harvest comes back. Well, again, this widow knew little or nothing of God, but she followed Elijah's instructions. And she and her household, says the scripture, ate for many days afterwards. Out of her needs, even though her wants were exhausted, out of her needs came her bounty. Out of her needs, her wants were fed. And the story continues on. As I said, the son becomes very ill, her only son. He's near death. And the widow blames Elijah as this man of God who comes into her life and brings punishment from God because of all her sins. She thinks that now Elijah, the one who provided for her in her great moment of need, is now the one who brought death upon her family. But Elijah makes no connection and demonstrates the compassion of the same God that was filling that tiny little urn of meal and that little bottle of oil. He lays over the child. And he prays over this child. And he proclaims to the mother that this child will be healed. And he, sure enough, gets up and he says, "See, your child is alive. Your son is alive." And it's at that moment there's another confession. And the widow sees the child back alive, and she confesses her faith in God's workings through the word of Elijah. Now all of a sudden, she is being fed her wants. The most intense want that she ever had probably in her life was that her son be back alive again, and that happens. And so there's clarity on the wants and the needs for the widow. The life of her son was both a want and both a need provided for by God, but then again she sees, and she's probably thinking back in her mind, and the story is around this other God, Baal, the small g God, that she realizes that this is the one true God, and she makes that confession. Even in the midst of drought and famine. Even in the midst of drought and famine, the wants, the true wants, were recognized, and the needs were fulfilled. The Gospel of Luke shares with us a similar story. It's almost a parallel story. Jesus is traveling with a crowd. He goes to the city of Nain, and there he encounters a funeral procession. It's the death of her only son. The mother is there. She's also a widow. She's full of grief and sorrow, and she's traveling outside for the burial with her friends and the mourners that had joined her. And Jesus sees her. He can feel her wants, her longings. He can feel her needs. He can feel everything about her, all the human pain he could feel right there, and he sees her. And the scripture says he had compassion for her. And then he speaks to her. He says, "Don't cry." And Jesus reaches out and he touches the stretcher. He reaches out. He breaks through that barrier of death. He puts his hand upon the stretcher. And he commands the dead man to get up. And the only son gets up and speaks. And Jesus, like Elijah, turns over the son alive once again to his mother. The greatest need fulfilled. The crowd praises God and proclaims the presence of a great prophet right there in the midst of this healing. And then sees that God has come to help his people. And so God has come to help his people is what's proclaimed by the people in the midst of this healing. And has God come to proclaim and to help his people to fulfill all their wants or to address the needs? I say, well, when the wants are exhausted and used up, the needs are what we have left. And it's at that time we find that the truth is between certain wants and certain needs, certain things that keep us who we are, to make us human and keep us well, intersect, and that's where we find the grace of God providing for us. Yesterday I stopped by the Goodwin School up the street here in Forest to help out a few minutes, an hour or so with the bottle drive. There was a bottle drive held by the students and the teachers to support the community garden there. When I got there, towards the end of the bottle drive, I saw huge piles of bags of bottles and cans. I didn't imagine there'd be so many. There were bags upon bags. There were water bottles, soda bottles, beer bottles. And there must have been couple thousand. And I looked at them and we talked about what we're going to have to do. We're going to have to move them to another site because they can't sit on the front lawn of the school, so we took them behind the school, and some of them will be processed over the course of the week, and that money will come back to the school. But as we looked at them, we started to talk about, wow, all these soda cans. Look how much we consume as a community. This is just a tiny fraction of the community, a few volunteers who brought cans, but I don't know how many soda cans there were. I don't know how many beer cans and beer bottles there were. And never mind the beer and the soda, all the water bottles. All the water bottles that were there. All brands and flavors. It was a visible message to me and for those that were gathering that our consumption and our taste was really big. Our consumption of soda and beer and bottled water was huge. There were bags upon bags upon bags upon bags. You know, water is obviously required for life. And water is both a want and a need. It's one of those intersecting things. We want water. We want water to be clean so that we can live without any problems of health, be it individual or public. But clean water flows from our tap. Why do we want bottled water? Is it because we were given an impression that we needed it? I grew up in the time when there was no such thing as bottled water. And many of you were too. I know there are places in the world where we have to have bottled water because you can't just go and turn a faucet on. But that's not our place. So my question for us is, do we need bottled water or do we want bottled water? And then you look at all the soda and all the other things. Do we need all these different types of soda or do we want all these different types of soda? And how does that fit into the life of our community and our health and our well-being? The people of Flint, Michigan will tell us that we're very fortunate here at East Hartford. We can turn on the faucet and not have to worry at all. People of Flint, Michigan will tell us to be very thankful for bottled water because if it wasn't for bottled water, they would be really in trouble. The town of Bloomfield, right next door over here across the river, has been struggling whether they wanted to host a huge water bottling plant. And what kind of stress it would put on their water system and the roads and so on. Wants and needs. And so today we can fill our wants when it comes to choosing our beverages, but there are serious life-threatening conditions in other parts of the world where clean water is not free or available. Do our wants for bottled water take from others who just simply want clean water to come out of a hand pump? As people of faith, we must be prayerfully aware that famine and drought is the source of suffering and unplanned migration and death. And as we think about the people that are moving from North Africa and other places out of places that are war-torn, one of the issues for them is that they cannot live safely. They cannot live in a place where there is no clean water, or water that's easily available to them. And without water, there's no economy. Without water, there's no agriculture. Brothers and sisters, it is not God's intention that God's people live under these circumstances. To live under these great deficits of needs where others live in the great wealth of wants. It is not God's plan for some people in the world to have all their wants and other people in the world to have little or no fulfillment of their needs. That is not God's plan. We hear that in the Psalms. 146 talks about God providing for the oppressed and the hungry. I believe and I pray that you will grow in faith with me that it's God's intention and it's God's plan that all of God's people will have what is necessary for the fullness of life and that the church is charged with the responsibility of working towards that. We all have our wants and needs. We all do. We share some of the same wants and needs as people of faith and as neighbors. And as humans, we share certain wants and needs with all of humanity. There are some deep wants and needs that I have that I know that my brothers and sisters in other parts of the world have those same needs and that we are connected through that desire to have safety and health and well-being and food and care for family, and you know the list. And history tells us that humans have always seemed to be able to put their wants of self before the needs of others. We look through all history, we can go to the ancient books Even in 1 Kings, you can find out that the kings themselves, they put their own wants first, the power that they found that they could have much more if they temporarily or unfaithfully connected with Baal and left the God of Israel behind. They thought they could have more wants, and they didn't worry about the needs of others because they had what they wanted. We see this every day and everywhere. And as Christians, as people of faith, as followers of Jesus, we must remain committed to this prophetic ministry of the Hebrew Bible. We must be Elijah-like, being able to go and to challenge others, even in the midst of their struggles, to have faith and to carry out the compassionate mystery of Jesus Christ, to be willing to go to places and say, rise up. Rise up. To be able to be willing to put resources into those places where there is great hunger and need over our own particular wants. We learn both that our God is a compassionate God. We learn that our God is a God who cares for those whose needs are not being met. Whether it's because of human greed or natural disaster, God is at work. God is at work doing the work that is necessary for renewal, for restoration, and for reconciliation. And this work requires separating the wants from the needs. The work of God calls for selflessness and sacrifice. This is what we hear over and over again from the gospel. The work of God calls the people of God to serve those whose wants have been exhausted. They can no longer want because the needs are so big. The people of God are called to serve those whose basic needs are threatened. The people of God are called to share God's love. And God's love is best seen through the sharing of God's bounty. And let us now prepare ourselves. God has been very good to us in a variety of different ways. Yes, maybe not all our wants have been complete, but many of our needs have been. And so when we come forward to receive the elements of communion, we come forth knowing that out of this holy sacrament, God has provided for us because of our needs. The great offering of God's only Son to us is because of our need for wholeness and restoration and reconciliation and renewal and forgiveness out of God's desire to serve and to minister to us through Jesus. And so we come to this table to share in God's bounty of grace as it is gifted to us through the life and death of Jesus Christ, who gave us the example and the one who was able to easily separate his wants from his needs. Jesus honestly told us when he was in the Garden of Gethsemane praying on his knees, blood coming from his eyes, sweat. He wanted to live. But he turned it over to God and said, thy will. It was the need for humanity. It was the need that he served by offering himself up in obedience to God's will. And for that, we are ever thankful. For that, we have this table. And for that, we are nourished and strengthened. And for that, we are given wisdom and the ability to discern the difference between wants and needs. And so I pray as we go forth in ministry together and life together that we carefully and prayerfully think about, do I want that or do I need that? And that we pray and spend time over those big decisions. And I know that through the exercise myself that sometimes new resources are created that can be offered up in new ways to create God's kingdom. To be able to make a little bit more of a contribution to something that's important to me and my values in the church and outside the church. I thank God for all the wants that we have received. And I thank God for all the needs that we have been blessed with. May God continue to be generous with us as we grow together as his people in this place and time. Amen.